Hi, welcome to WTUFO. I'm Caleb, and this is John.
What the UFO? Hi, Caleb. How you doing today?
I'm okay. How about you?
I'm good. I was up until like 2:30 in the morning reading Ross Coulthart's Reddit AMA. Come here, everybody.
Oh, nice. Let's definitely start with that. Long range, we're going to do Deathbed Confessions-ish. We're going to do sort of a quick walk through a lot of them, and then we're going to land on Phil Corso and dive into The Day After Roswell, which I just read, and it's very fun.
I'm
So
very excited
first,
about this. Caleb did a ton of homework. You did a ton of homework for this week, and I did like no homework. So I'm
you
really
read this
excited.
extremely long Ross Coulthart thread, so that's
Dude's got time to
excellent.
kill, I guess. I don't know what else he did.
Also, we both watched the John Oliver take, and we could maybe have takes about that take if you feel like doing that. But
Yeah,
maybe let's start with Coulthard.
sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't have a ton to say about it. I'm not even done reading it. It's very long. I think it's awesome that he took so much time to do this and gives like he answers questions that I did not expect to be answered about like crazy stuff. Like for instance, like what's the one word that you think we're not thinking about enough? And he says psionics. It's my Coulthard. It's not very good. I think it's psionics, something like that.
It's definitely psionics with a P. I remember because it used to be in Dungeons and Dragons, and there are no psionics anymore.
That's bull. Well,
Seems
okay, so I guess the one answer that I'll share, and maybe you then mention one that you liked, the friggin' blue beings thing that somebody asks about. I had missed this. It's wild. He basically the person was asking Ross about a clip where he had said that he had heard from a few people, from 3 different people, that they had recently been in touch with some blue beings. And they felt compelled to reach out to Ross Coulthart to tell him about this.
He says 3 different people from 3 different parts of the world.
Yes, and that they received downloads of information, and that one of them in particular was able to then understand complex physics equations just like instantly by looking at them, which Coulthart says he has seen them do. So
that's crazy.
And then he, he's asked about that video, that like clip of him on saying that, and what he says then is like, yeah, since I made that video, I've heard from a bunch more people who also say they've talked to a blue person.
Oh my God! This blue
so
being is trying to get in touch with Ross Coulthart. That's so
very
cool.
fun, and that's the thing that I'm going to send to my most woo friends in this space, the people who want the the straight moonshine UFO content. The blues I honestly haven't heard of the blues, like the Nordics, the Greys, the Reptiloids, but blues is kind of new.
That's new to me, but the place I think I've seen it this week is on the R Gateway tapes landscape, which I dabble in because I'm into the Monroe Institute and I'm like playing with some of these flax. If anybody wants the flax, hit us up. No, just kidding. Pay for them. Call the Monroe Institute and pay thousands of dollars for them instead, or at least hundreds.
So, man, just like quick sidebar, when I keep hovering over this, what's it called? The binaural process, like binaural sounds.
Huh? The HemiSync, like HemiSync is the sort of brand name of the Monroe version of it, but binaural beats is the like generic term, I think, for what that means. Which basically just means like 2 different kinds of frequency in your ears, basically.
But with the idea being that it can be useful to like sync up the hemispheres of your brain to make you better able to meditate or reach astral projection kind of.
Yeah, that's the Monroe promise of it.
All right, so there are playlists out there like on Spotify and Apple Music where you are like binaural, and I keep being like, oh, should I listen to this when I sleep? But then I think about the thing that you told me that I wish you hadn't told me in one of the weirdo books that you read.
Yeah, me too. I think about this also.
Yeah,
I know what you're gonna say because I'm psionic.
Yeah.
You're gonna say that this girl in a psychic book I read said that if you astrally project and you don't know what you're doing, you can like open up a hole in the fabric of reality around your place and invite bad spirits in, or ill-meaning, beings.
Yeah, dude, I'm not trying to meet a Dracula behind this shit,
I will say, oh man, we're like already pretty deep in the blue being weeds here, but something I've heard repeatedly in various spiritual places now is that the part of the truth that they've had revealed to them in these cosmic journeys is that there's just like way, way, way more good than bad. That like there's evil in the universe, but it's like a tiny percentage. That it's not like a giant yin yang. It's like 99.98% love, and then there's some evil, and that just kind of keeps the whole thing moving. It allows for free will and choice and blah blah blah, which I'm not sure is real either. But can we do cosmic journeys another time, like
Yeah,
on our own?
absolutely. Please.
Okay.
I just was up at 2:30 in the morning and needed to get to sleep, but I didn't want to listen to binaural meditation mixes because you frankly scared me.
Well, who knows what they would do? I think probably a lot of them would have nothing to do with accidentally leaving your body. Also, some people think you accidentally leave your body just every night when you dream. So I don't know if that's real, but maybe.
All right, what are we talking about? The stock
John
market?
Oliver, John Oliver, just briefly, because you touched on this point when we were discussing Coulthard a little bit, which is like the staggering fact of an NHI presence is just like so immense that it's really weird that people aren't thinking about it and aren't curious about it and talking about it more. And I just wanted to mention kind of one of my only like problems with what was otherwise like a pretty solid presentation from John Oliver is just that he blows off the alien exit in a way that's like not super helpful. I think it is super helpful that he got a bunch of especially liberal people on board. He gave them a permission structure to say things at parties like, hey, actually, you know, we should look into UFOs. Great. That's awesome. And that's really the whole project that he was embarking on, I think. But
Yeah.
he does say like, and by the way, you know, they might not be aliens, but that's not the hard part to think about, I think. And I think
Mhm.
like I wanted the next half of the sentence to be like, but they might be. And if they are, we have a lot to think about. And it could be really interesting. And
Mhm.
that's fine. Like it doesn't have to go much deeper than that. But I think it's like really important when people engage with this topic that they engage with that idea, because if they're not willing to do that, then they're just going to get stuck in the human tech or you know weather phenomena space, and it's not gonna move them sufficiently to engage as much as they should. And also it just like feels like a weird like side hatch to take. Like what do you mean you're really interested in what these things are but you don't think they're aliens? Like you're saying you think they're probably Russian and Chinese tech? Then like no, the military's not going to tell you. It'll never even be your business. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of the format of John Oliver's show to like talk about an issue and then just kind of like wrap it up at the end and be like, yeah, on to the next one and provide some sort of like false closure. And then like never come back to it, I think mostly. So I don't know. I thought it was okay. I thought it was okay and also dated and like leaning on like Roswell. Like, why are we digging in on that instead of like digging in on the Tic Tac? And yeah, ultimately, I found it kind of frustrating. And I sent it to one skeptic friend, and skeptic's the wrong word. He's just a friend who like won't get interested in this, but by really ought to be interested in it. And I don't think it probably moved the needle at all for him.
Yeah,
So that's frustrating to me.
that is a
Still,
little annoying.
fun to hear somebody dunk on the Condon report, though, in like a
Oh, that was
mainstream.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I really appreciate connecting the wires of like profound skepticism about the military industrial complex with openness to scientific inquiry. Like those two things should really
Mhm.
come together, and that's like that's a good angle in. I think we've talked about this, but for like the political left, which is kind of having a harder time, I think, getting interested in UFOs because they don't want to uh, give any credence to the idea of a deep state, maybe, especially right now. So it's like important to have John Oliver, who frankly is a figure of the left, invite people from that culture into this
Yeah,
conversation.
it's also on some level, it's just frustrating to have the conclusion be like, and we really should be looking at this because, like, no shit. And that's been the conclusion for like 80 years. And it's like kind of a cop out. Not that like John Oliver gets to like create a congressional panel or something. Um, Also, nothing about that, right? In the whole thing. I think we barely talked about Congress. I don't even think he talked about the Schumer amendment.
Skipped Grush. Yeah, skipped the Schumer amendment,
Yeah,
skipped
that's kind of
NHI.
malpractice in my opinion. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for
Like
most other issues, he would like land with where are we now legislatively?
to make what room for like Bloomberg or for sorry for like the Blue Book and the Condon stuff and Roswell, but not talk about the Tic Tac in more detail than he did, and not talk about the Schumer amendment, which is like a really staggering, weird piece of legislation. That just seems like it seems like somewhere between malpractice and like being a scaredy cat and not
Mhm.
wanting to appear crazy.
Yeah, I think that's right. Still notch it as a like a general small W
I think a win.
um,
Yeah, I think a
for the
win.
conversation,
I
just
do
to
think
make
so.
it bigger.
The
So should we
distance.
pivot into dissonance,
Oh,
psionics?
no,
What are you mumbling?
I said discourse. Yes, let's pivot, please. Let's hear your book report. Where are we starting?
Okay. So first, Deathbed Confessions in general, I thought there would be more. That's like takeaway number one when I started looking into this is it's basically like the Roswell Boys and like a couple of friends, but not a ton of people yet, which maybe is just because like not a ton of people from the era where this lockdown started happening have died.
Mhm.
Probably would have liked one from like Roscoe Hillenkotter, first director of the CIA. That would have been good. I assume he's dead, but I
We got
don't
him.
know for sure. Okay. So what I thought I'd do is like do a quick little rundown of some people who have said things later in life, and then build up toward the Roswell Boys, and land on Phil Corso and go deep on that one. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great. Just remember to stop and breathe and drink water every now and then, and I'll try to think of clever questions to ask you.
Okay. So first of all, there are two astronauts. They didn't make deathbed confessions, but they made confessions during their life or like had instincts in this direction. One is Gordon Cooper, the other is Edgar Mitchell. Gordon Cooper said he saw basically like a formation of UFOs when he was flying warplanes in Germany, and this kind of screwed with his. It may have kind of screwed with his astronaut career. Edgar Mitchell believed the Roswell stories and like said he had inside information about that, but never claimed to see a UFO himself, even in space. But he also went on to found the Noetic Institute, and got very interested in psionics for the rest of his life. So I don't even really know why these guys are in this conversation. You can blame ChatGPT for bringing them here, but they said things later in life and they were controversial.
Okay.
Um, then there's this slightly more serious dude whose name is Paul Hellyer. He was the Canadian Minister of National Defense in the 1960s. And so he's like a relatively serious person to believe the Roswell stories, but basically that's what he did, believe the Roswell stories. He read this book that we're going to talk about in a little bit, The Day After Roswell, and he called an Air Force, actually his son called an Air Force general that he knew, and that Air Force general told Hellyer and his son, yes, this book is real. Yes, Roswell was aliens, basically, and there's even more crazy shit that I could tell you. And so Hellyer felt it was important to tell everybody else that he had received this information and that he believed that it was true. So later in his life, he kind of went on a campaign of making these announcements and talking about it openly. And I believe he lived into his 90s. So he did
Hmm.
that for some time. And
Wow.
along the way, he got like a fair amount of attention from some, he described them as like intelligence officials, believed from the United States, who attempted to, slip him disinformation, which he said he sussed out that they would try to like leak him things that would make him sound crazy because they weren't true.
Hmm.
And they figured he was like credulous enough to buy it and share it, and then they could bust him. And they tried to get from him the name of this Air Force general, and they implied to him strongly that they wanted to crack down on this person and like kick him around a bit. So he didn't like that at all, and he liked talking about it. He also has some interesting, like maybe borderline kooky or like borderline revolutionary theories about economics. He doesn't like the Fed having, sole money printing abilities in the United States, and he has some very full-throated takes on econ. So we'll share an interview with him in our show notes, and you can check this guy out. All right, so then there are two more that come with videos, which is fun because we can link to them. And I'm curious if you have any information about this or like takes about these videos, because I feel like we probably both watched them when they dropped. One is Boyd Bushman, and the other is Agent Cooper, spelled Cooper, Kewper. These guys look remarkably similar. They're sort of like frumpy old balding white dudes, and we're like weirdly shapen, and they're on the way out. Like these do qualify as pretty deathbed, especially Agent Cooper, whose full name is Oscar Wayne Wolf with 2 X. And
his name's Cooper or Wool?
Quote Agent Cooper Stein. This is like CIA name, and his full name is Oscar Wayne Wolf with 2 F's. And our boys Richard Dolan and Jellyfish Corbell are in this video because they set it up and film it in like a motel in Florida or something. It looks weird.
I love it.
And he just tells them stories about being involved in the crash retrieval and reverse engineering. Richard Dolan is sitting on a bed in this interview. Just great. I think Jeremy Corbell's working the camera. Leans in for a handshake at the very top.
Amazing.
And Boyd Bushman is the guy who like brought Polaroids and like holds them all up and is like, this is the alien and this is the machines of the alien.
Looking at him now. Which one of these guys do you want to tell me about first?
I don't really have much to say about either of these guys. The only thing I have about Bushman is that people have claimed that the alien picture he shows has been debunked as a toy, but the only evidence that I have found to provide a receipt for that debunking claim is that there's like a very brief YouTube video by like a totally anonymous poster that looks like it's footage of this body in a toy case, but like no one's provided an SKU number for the toy or like an ad for the toy or like a link to the toy in real life. So it's possible that that's like counter intel.
I've been down that particular rabbit hole and watched that video, and it's an unconvincing debunking. I think they're not bringing the receipts there.
Yeah, which is weird because it would seem sort of easy. But I will say one more thing about these, which is the way this guy's throwing around pictures and the way the other guy is telling crazy stories connects to one take from the day after Roswell about disclosure, which is that sometimes part of the plan might be to let some of the crazier stuff through the cracks with the intention that it both soften the ground and maybe seem unbelievable simultaneously. So I did want to, I'm sorry. We'll loop back around to that. But I wanted to ask, did you watch these videos and do you have takes or reactions?
I haven't seen them. No, I don't. I think I watched the Bushman one a while ago, but no. Okay,
cool. Well, we'll put them in the place, and if you guys watch them and you want to talk with us about them, we want to hear what you think about them, and we'll watch them, and maybe you and I will have a conversation about them another time. Sound good?
Sound good.
Okay, so then rounding the corner to the last leg of the journey, getting back to sort of like ground zero UFO, there actually are a bunch of confessions from the Roswell boys, and there are there are 4 of them. I'm going to talk about 3 of them. I'm going to sideline Frank Kaufman, because I just don't know anything about him. And some people claimed that many of his documents were fabricated. So there's a lot of discourse about Kaufman, but he seems like maybe one of the less reliable figures. We don't know for sure. He claims that he was working there and saw, extraterrestrial looking stuff. So then we have 3 people who were working in the Roswell world. And I'm not a Roswell expert, so I don't know a ton about this, but I'm going to say their names and we'll go a little bit into it. Walter Haut, who was the information officer at Roswell in 1947. He was pretty young. I think he's in his 20s at the time. Jesse Marcel, who was the intelligence officer who first handled the debris and who gets caught in that shitty staged photo with the phony weather balloon shit, looking pretty pissed, kind of the next day, I think, or 2 days later. And then Philip J. Corso, who was not at Roswell, but who was involved later in processing some of the crash materials, according to him. So starting with Walter Haut both has the thinnest thing to say and the most serious way to say it, because all he really says is this stuff looked extraterrestrial to me. But the way he says that is that he gets an affidavit signed with, I believe, a notary republic and a notary public, and he works out with his daughter all the details of what he's going to say. It's notary public, right? Okay. Anyway, he formally issues this statement, and then it's sealed to be released upon his death, which is a pretty serious thing to do. And I respect his care and his narrow crafted message. And we will also link to this affidavit in full. The basic big punchline is, I am convinced that what I personally observed was some type of craft and its crew from outer space. He was convinced of that, but he also gives some more details about seeing the bodies, seeing the craft, which he describes as egg-shaped and 12 to 15 feet, with no windows, did appear metallic, no wings, no tail section or landing gear. And again, this is all a very formal, very limited affidavit. And I respect him for that, because it's not sprawling, it's not crazy, and he never said it in life. So I think you got to give him some credibility for never selling this story, not going on a book tour. Just really, he got nothing from this.
Well, wait, isn't this the guy, though, whose daughter runs a Roswell Museum in Roswell, or is that somebody else?
Oh, that seems believable. Yeah.
What's his name again? Sorry.
Haut. Hey, Jamie, find Haut's daughter's museum. Jamie. There it is. Just kidding. I don't know. But that sounds believable. And his daughter did help him with this affidavit. So
I think I'm pretty sure that's detailed in Plain Sight, the Coulthard book, but I don't know.
Okay, I would believe that. And it's also pretty thin. So we'll move to Jesse Marcel, lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Air Force.
The thinness of that is kind of cool and interesting and kind of lends credibility to it, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Circumspect statement delivered in the most kind of, I don't know, legally hefty way that you could do that.
Yeah, I agree. He's not telling a story about meeting an alien and having psychic thoughts implanted. Right. He didn't write a book. Yeah, his daughter might have this thing. It's worth noting that, by the way, there are, I believe, 2 affidavits. He made a narrow one in, I think, 2007 or something, and then he elaborated on it shortly before his death in 2013. So there's a 2002, and a 1993. There's a very brief one from 1993, and then there's this elaborated one in 2002. He passed away shortly after.
Hmm.
So then there's Jesse Marcel, who's the guy in the picture, the very famous picture. And the things to tell about Marcel, without having done a super deep dive, are that he he does spend a bunch of time later in his life saying this was aliens, basically.
Yeah.
And at the time, on the night, he does this really cool thing where he stops by his home after picking up some of the crash stuff, and he shows it to his wife and then I believe like 11-year-old son, and they play with the stuff. And Marcel says basically like, I think this is from a flying saucer, and like we're probably never going to get to see it again, so like let's check it out. Isn't this cool? And they described it as like an interesting combination of stuff, like ranging from aluminum to some things that were like wood beams to like a purplish uh, strip of writing. Like on the insides of these beams, there were uh, symbols written in like a purplish color. And his son described them as like not quite hieroglyphics, but like abstract symbols of some kind.
Hmm.
And like curiously, coincidentally, later when we get the reveal, the like what sounds to me like a better cover up, like months or years later, the Air Force comes out with a story that's like, oh, actually, there were super secret weather balloons that like even these guys didn't know about.
Yeah, that's
And
1994.
that's 94.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know about this story? Do you remember what it's called?
Oh man, no, I don't. I was just listening to it. I think it's the third or fourth explanation that the Air Force gives.
Project Mogul, maybe?
Yeah,
Yeah,
mogul. That's it, mogul. Super high
right,
altitude
right,
balloons.
right. Which is like, it's if it is disinformation, it's like quite high quality disinformation because it's like pretty believable. I've heard people say that like maybe the timeline doesn't add up. It did set off like a suspicious bell for me that somebody described the Project Mogul balloons as like, oh, they included purple tape with symbols on it, and I was just like, that's so specific. That's really like, what kind of symbols? Why? Can you say more about that?
Yeah, that's
Um,
interesting.
it just feels like it was designed to explain this particular story.
I mean, it's plausible, except when you take into account like the descriptions of the debris field by the ranch hand who found the place, or like the initial report from the Air Force general saying that they'd recovered a disc. And when you take into account all these people who, after the fact, said that something else had happened, including the guy in the picture with the weather balloon, like it just doesn't add. I don't know. Kind of off topic for us to like go down the Roswell path here, but like
I
I don't
think it's
know.
kind of where we are.
I
Did
think
you
we're
know
just be lied about. They're gonna just lie about it forever to us.
that sounds likely? Did you know that that ranch hand like disappeared for a week after,
Oh,
and
what?
yeah, he like left his ranch, and then came back and I think had a new car. Citation needed on that. I wish I had the receipts, but it sounds strong. It sounds a lot like somebody like yoinked him up and like took him to a facility and was like, "You can't tell anybody about this ever," and then like made a deal with him and brought him back. I also heard in diving into this a little bit that there were some stories about like really scary Air Force dudes coming to the homes of people who
Yeah.
saw stuff or who were related to the crew and just like scaring the shit out of them. Like there was one woman who like recounted the story of being a little girl and seeing this dude in like a big helmet like yell at her and her mother and say, if you ever talk about this you will disappear in the desert. And she's like crying about this as a full grown woman, like at 65. And that all just seems like a little extreme for high altitude weather balloons, even if they were military. So I think that probably is a good transition to the big dude, Philip Corso. Philip James Corso. It's just a ridiculous picture on his Wikipedia page. Uh, he's leaning back, kind of. Because maybe don't start there if you're about to get into Phil Corso. Don't start with the Wikipedia picture. Um, so I learned a bunch of interesting maybe things from Phil Corso's book, The Day After Roswell in 1997. And the only reason I'll start with a maybe is that it is the opposite of Haut's extremely narrow, very clear claim. It's like a broad, sprawling, massive story about this guy's life, his career in government, and everything he was involved with, some of which sounds like fantastical. Like there's a moment later in the book where he sort of takes credit for the Bay of Pigs crisis and like getting Kennedy to respond to missiles because he says he like saw this intelligence and like leaked it to a reporter in Boston to put pressure on Kennedy when he was visiting Massachusetts because Corso felt he had concluded that Kennedy must be aware of this intelligence but not acting on it, and so there's some like hints in this book of like self-aggrandizement. It's wide and sprawling, but it does come very late in his life. It's like the year before he dies. And on a personal like gut check level, it's very, very detailed. And the like level of granular information in it really, to me, does pass the smell test. A lot of it feels true. And there's a bunch of stuff that I think is like worth considering as information, even if it's just sort of like contextual vibes about the time and a place that was post World War II America and the military's response to Roswell. Do you have any questions or breathers or?
No, not yet. Please keep going.
Okay, cool. We'll just let me cook then. We'll let Phil Corso cook. Okay. So very brief resume. He serves in Army intelligence in Europe in World War II. He joins the Army in 1942. He serves in Army intelligence in Europe, and he becomes the chief of the U.S. Counterintelligence Corps in Rome, which is like a crazy post at the time. Obviously, among other things, he like has an audience with the Pope. I believe, this is Sam, I might be getting my wires crossed, but I think he like interfaces with the local mafia to like keep shit functional. He secures safe passage for like I think 10,000 Jews out of Europe. This is like in the immediate aftermath of World War II. And then from this position, he goes on to be a member of the staff of Eisenhower's National Security Council for 4 years, from 1953 to 1957. So he does work at the White House. And then in the 1960s, he becomes the chief of the Pentagon's Foreign Technology Desk in the Army Research and Development, working under Lieutenant General Arthur Trudeau.
Okay.
And that's, yeah. And that's where he gets this box of materials, ostensibly from the Roswell crash. And one of the first things that jumps out about the way he gets this box is it does not come with receipts. There is no like documentation that accompanies this box. And he's struck by this, and I was struck hearing it because it sounds like a big part of the problem. And when we talk about like our contemporary attempts to like verify the existence of this program, you and I have discussed the like clean hands approach inside these offices that like prevents not just a bullshit operation like Arrow, but like a very serious operation like the New York Times from getting any of these documents, because you can't get a document that just doesn't exist. So that I thought was really interesting. But
that's a theme.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's a theme that comes up in when you're learning about this stuff. Like I'm pretty sure the Twining memo has a similar sort of provenance where they're like, we just found it in this folder, and it actually sort of uses a different typeface than we used at the time, and nobody knows where it came from. And then also just last night in the Coulthard, the Coulthard Reddit. Through that, I learned about this other document that was a memo. It's the damn, I don't remember her name right now. Or his name right now. Mead. I'm gonna pull it up. But yeah, Mead Lane. This Mead Lane memo that is sent the same day as the Roswell story breaks, and it has a like filing number on it that apparently doesn't actually correspond to any sort of filing system. So I don't know. This is just like, it feels like maybe smoke of a disinformation camp, or disinformation cover up. I don't know, like some whatever these structures are that are opaque to us, that are, and like methods for compartmentalizing information, or like conducting a like, you know, longitudinal kind of confusion campaign.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is part of that. And actually, it had me thinking last night about the CIA, that old. If you ever looked at that CIA manual from the Cold War about how to like gum up administrative works and just like be a big
No,
asshole as a bureaucrat.
no.
It's like if we have a guy inside the Kremlin or something, is like the guidebook for sucking at your job so much that it becomes like a national security liability for the country you're in. And
Wow.
it's a lot of stuff like that, of like, be unclear in your emails, like, or I mean, we weren't talking about emails, I guess, your
Huh,
memos, like use typos even, or just like call for extra
huh.
meetings and review sessions when they aren't necessary, and then
Wow.
drag your feet or don't show up, or things like that. So I don't know, those kinds of like psyop tactics are real and documented.
That is fascinating. And it leads me to two places. One is a quote from this book about like an old story about keeping secrets, which is a group of men protecting their deepest secrets, took their secrets and hid them in a shack whose location was secret, but the location was discovered. So they built a second shack and stored those secrets that they still kept. And then the second shack was discovered. So they realized they'd have to give up some secrets to protect the rest. And they again moved to build a third shack. And for this process repeated itself over and over until anyone wanting to find out what the secrets were would have to start at the first shack and work from shack to shack until they could go no further because they didn't know the next location. And he says for 50 years, this was the process by which the secrets of Roswell were protected by various serial incarnations of an ad hoc confederation of top secret working groups throughout different branches of the government. And it is still going on today. And at the time today, I believe is 1997 when he's writing this.
Wild. Very cool.
Yeah, so zooming out, this guy's top line, big picture, is that he gets some of these materials and then they concoct a plan to like sort of cover their tracks by introducing them into the technology bloodstream of corporate America. And so he like sort of hatches or helps lead some of the re-engineering, reverse engineering efforts. And he talks about like a bunch of specific technologies that he claims came from this, including like lasers and night vision and Kevlar. But there's like a general tone thing that I thought was really interesting about the way that he got handed this box, which also rang with what you were talking about with the counterintelligence, which is that post World War II, everybody was fucking terrified of everybody else, and like the world was like very much on a war footing. And it wasn't just because World War II had just ended. It was also because going into World War II, they had just finished what they thought would be the last war ever. And then like World War II just happened, like just shook the world again. So there was very much this attitude of like, okay, well, what's next? Like, when's World War III, right? And like all eyes immediately went to Stalin and Russia. And everybody in the United States government was freaking out about that. And the way Corso describes it is that the military was like highly segmented, and that the like branches didn't trust each other, and departments within branches didn't trust each other, and nobody trusted the CIA. And nobody trusted the CIA partially because he said another really interesting thing, that spies in some cases tended to trust each other more than their political bosses, and that included like crossing national lines. So he said, didn't
Mm.
describe any specific instances of this, but he said there were times that like American and Russian spies, just because of the nature of their like profession and their devotion to the profession, like just had more confidence that they could predict the behavior of each other than they could predict the behavior of their political bosses. So they almost, in a weird way, like trusted spies from the KGB more than they trusted like the White House. Is
Hmm.
Corso's implication sometimes. And that, like, meanwhile, the KGB is like just trying to get along and not get destroyed by the Kremlin. So, like, they were willing to sort of play along sometimes. And, like, as a result, you get information swaps and leaks. And Corso's sort of big picture is that because Russia and America were both aware of the extraterrestrial threat, they did a lot of stuff that looked like it was Cold War focused, but really it was like developmental in in regard to like skilling us up to face
Hmm.
ET, basically non-human intelligences. So a bunch of the like space initiatives that happened under Reagan, he says, were like sort of secretly aimed at developing defense mechanisms for America to actually confront non-human intelligence and shoot down some of their craft, which apparently, according to Corso, we eventually successfully did.
Hmm. Coulthard talked in the AMA last night about the rumors that we've shot down craft with EMPs.
Yeah.
He said it's something that he's heard and hopes is not true.
Hopes it isn't true.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Just seems like a bad idea to be shooting them, I think, is his
Well,
take.
that's interesting. It's Corso's take is like these guys don't give a shit about us, and we need to defend ourselves. And at least his vibe was like they're cutting up our cattle like they just don't care, and
Yeah.
they're at the best indifferent to human
Yeah.
affairs, and at the worst trying to mess with us.
Yeah.
So he also had this. He brought this point of view that, along with us not trusting our own branches of government, that we didn't trust the Soviets, and we were extremely nervous that the Soviets might get ahead in the ET race and that they might like make a deal with the aliens and like come out on top, dominating the Earth. So we've been like, the way Corso tells it, we were like doing a very tricky dance to try and like counter the Soviet rise, but really try to counter the alien rise. And it also, I just wanted to say, I think it makes sense that the extreme concern about the secrecy of this material would in some ways relate to like pedestrian terrestrial concerns about our opponents getting access to this information.
Mhm.
And I think that probably still stands as logic underpinning the secrecy of the crash retrieval program.
Yeah.
Like if it's public, then it's a massive target for spies. It's already a target for spies, but it's like way harder to defend it if it definitely exists. And if
Yeah.
you're like inviting teams from Stanford and MIT in to come see your material, then like
Right.
bam, some of those people are going to be spies. And we're like very worried about this technology getting into the wrong hands because we're still figuring it out ourselves.
Citation needed. Okay, good. Tell me more about Corso. What? Break me off another bar here.
Okay, cool. All right. So there's Corso has a body experience. He's protecting a base one night where the stuff is stashed, and he like opens a crate and describes a spooky looking body that scares the hell out of him. And this is like not the beginning of his relationship with the crash materials because he's not read in or allowed to have access to it at that time. It's
Mhm.
just like the beginning of the journey for him is seeing this thing. Uh, if you want, I could describe this thing. Would you? Do you think that's
Yeah,
value add?
yeah, tell me about the spooky body.
Okay. Okay. So he opens up this thing. Whatever they'd created this way, it was a coffin, but not like any coffin I'd seen before. The contents, enclosed in a thick glass container, were submerged in a thick, light blue liquid, almost as heavy as a gelling solution of diesel fuel. But the object was floating, actually suspended, and not sitting on the bottom with the fluid over top. And it was soft and shiny as the underbelly of a fish. And at first, I thought it was a dead child they were shipping somewhere, but this was no child. It was a 4-foot human-shaped figure with arms. Bizarre. 4-fingered hands. I didn't see a thumb. Thin legs and feet, and an oversized incandescent light bulb-shaped head that looked like it was floating over a balloon gondola for a chin. I knew I must have cringed at first, but then I had the urge to pull off the top of the liquid container and touch the pale gray skin. But I couldn't tell whether it was skin because it also looked like a very thin one-piece head-to-toe fabric covering the creature's flesh. Its eyeballs must have been rolled way back in its head because I couldn't see any pupils or iris or anything that resembled a human eye. But the eye sockets themselves were oversized and almond-shaped and pointed down to its tiny nose, which didn't really protrude from the skull. It was more like the tiny nose of a baby that never grew as the child grew, and it was mostly nostril. Yeah, he goes on a little bit. He says the features are all arranged frontally, small circle on the lower part of the head,
Okay.
no protruding ears, cheeks had no definition, no eyebrows, no facial hair, tiny flat slit for a mouth, and later he would discuss a more thorough rundown from the medical team at that big hospital that everybody goes to in DC, who told him the bones were super thin and that the lungs were much higher, had like a much higher capacity than humans relative to the overall body. And this kind of stuff led him to believe that these guys were like maybe clones or maybe drones designed for long-term space travel. They could hold more atmosphere in their lungs basically for longer. And also the bones had, like, because of their thinness and I think maybe flexibility, might have been better able to withstand like jarring changes of motion and very high speeds. Total side bunny hole here, but I bumped into another idea listening to another crazy person that I didn't include on this list, whose take was that he met some aliens that said they were from 68 light years away, and it took them 45 years to get here. And it should have, by like our best estimations at the time, taken them 60,000 years, but it only took them 45 years. But I thought that was, yeah, interesting as an idea that like maybe they can in fact go faster than light, but maybe it's not so much faster than light that it's like a portal gun to anywhere in the universe whenever, instantaneous travel. Maybe it's just like a lot better than our max imaginings right now. It's kind of an intriguing idea.
Yeah, it is. It is. Bring us back home. Though I regret letting you talk about the person in the blue coffin. You sound completely crazy, and I don't know this guy.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fair. I want to say another pedestrian-ish thing that Corso claims early in the book is that there are radar events at Roswell and White Sands that like presage the crash, and that there's like a big lightning storm this night. But there are like very unusual fast moving radar signatures, and it's so weird that the operators like break down the radar equipment to like check to see what's wrong with it, and then they reassemble it and they can't find anything wrong with it.
Interesting.
And it's doing the like rapidly zipping from one side of the screen to the other and like changing directions in super fast ways, which sounds a lot like some of the other stuff that we've heard. So it kind of sounds like maybe there were a bunch of craft flying around out there, and then it sounds like there was a big crazy lightning storm. So it's possible they were fighting, or it's possible somebody got hit by lightning. It's just possible somebody crashed, something like that. But that was news to me. I had not heard anybody make that claim before, and I don't think it's been verified or certified or agreed on anywhere else. But there are a few other fun things to talk about here, and like specifically there's a story maybe we can let this be like grand finale. He does get into the Twining memo. Twining is a fairly significant part of this story. He worked for Eisenhower, but I don't think he worked for Truman. So he doesn't get to like see these conversations with Truman, but he gets to hear about them, and he gets to interact with Twining and Hillenkotter, who are both in the loop on explaining to Truman what's going on. And these are a little bit long, but I think they're really interesting. So the basic assertion is that this group comes up with a way to do the cover up and the disclosure in a sort of way that's intertwined. They're talking about how crazy this is, and Truman asks them, "Are we ever going to tell people?" Basically, and everybody kind of goes quiet because they just don't know. They don't know what to do, and they ask him to talk to Twining. Hillenkotter says, like, you should talk to Twining because he's like kind of in the weeds on this and he knows the details. And Twining says that we can basically combine the cover up with the disclosure, which is, I thought, a really interesting idea. So I'm going to just read 2 paragraphs here. The group agreed that these were the requirements of the endeavor they would undertake. They would form nothing less than a government within the government, sustaining itself from presidential administration to presidential administration, regardless of whatever political party took power, and ruthlessly guarding their secrets while evaluating every new bit of information on flying saucers they received. But at the same time, they would allow disclosure of some of the most far-fetched information, whether true or not, because it would help create a climate of public attitude that would be able to accept the existence of extraterrestrial life without a general sense of panic. It will be, General Twining said, a case where the cover-up is the disclosure and the disclosure is the cover-up. Deny everything, but let the public sentiment take its course. Let skepticism do our work for us until the truth becomes common acceptance. Kind of a fascinating idea, and sort of like a high-level answer.
Yeah, that's really wild. That's one of the crazier ideas I've ever encountered in this space, at least around disclosure. That's really cool. It makes me want to read the book. I kind of hope that that's what's going on. It definitely feels like that's what's going on sometimes.
And so that's what I meant when I brought that up earlier about the like guys showing Polaroids before they die. Like, if there is an organization that's like deciding whether to block or not block people from doing stuff like that, they might take a look at like kind of a kooky looking former Lockheed Martin employee and say, like, this is fine. And also like it's a cake and eat it too situation, because A, people will think they're crazy, and B, this information gets out into the public consciousness, and that's a win-win.
And we're at like what, 57% of Americans believe in UFOs. Like that seems like a softening of, that seems like soft ground.
Yeah. Do you think everybody seems like really scared at this time in 47 of seeing the Orson Welles thing happen? I think there's a quote in this book about like, yeah, are you crazy? We can't tell people. Like, you want War of the Worlds to happen in real life, like again? Like, it was Orson Welles like screwed it for everyone because his radio play was so scary that like people died, and that convinced, when we actually met aliens, the government was like, well, we obviously can't tell people because look what happened when a radio play came out.
I think that's actually not true and is like really overblown and is kind of a just big American myth. And my understanding is that the whole idea that people really freaked out from the radio broadcast was actually something seeded by print journalism in the weeks after the event to try to push the idea that you can't trust radio news. You got to get your news from the paper here. Look at the dangers, the perils of radio waves.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Just like they dunk on Twitter.
Yeah.
So they describe like kind of concocting this plan and putting it into action.
Crazy.
And I don't know. There are. He sort of like speculates on this conversation. He hears about a conversation with Truman where they decide to do this, and Truman is like very worried about the political ramifications if people find out about this. Um, for him, which is like a reasonable concern.
Yeah.
I think he also describes in this book like the process of the V2 coming out, and like the president at the time, I don't remember if it's Eisenhower or Truman, that the V2 gets like revealed under, and he's like been warned by Russia that he's got to stop running V2 flights. Is it V2? I don't even know what I'm talking about. The secret bombers.
The spy plane, right?
Yeah, so I guess I'm talking about B2s, right? V2 rockets. B2. Anyway, he describes
the U2 spy plane is
U2.
in the 50s.
That's what I'm talking about. The CIA pushes and pushes for more and more of these flights, and the president's like kind of trying to rein them in, but they insist and request more, and they end up somebody gets caught and like paraded around Russia, and like it's an American person who has to like admit like, yeah, I was spying on your country, and it's like a massive blow to the president, and like, you know, a very embarrassing moment. And it's like kind of an example of the CIA like pushing a little further than the executive branch maybe would have wanted to.
Yeah.
To hear Corso tell it, we then like developed some space tech that kind of made that irrelevant. There's some stuff about Tesla in here, and like how J. Edgar Hoover probably stole his files, and how they worked on like concentrated energy rays and stuff. But the practical takeaway for Corso is that we did it. We like got ourselves to a place where we could actually compete with these NBEs or NDEs. I don't remember what he calls it. EBEs.
EBEs, yeah.
Yeah. Which is what? Extra biological entity?
What is it? Yeah, they call it EB1, EBE1. It's the supposed name of a... Yeah, I don't know. You're saying that Corso says that we cracked some stuff, and...
Yeah, that we eventually shot some down. Wait, I found another quote that I want to share from this Truman conversation, or like quote-ish, semi-quote. Truman says, Winchell would crucify me if he found out what we were doing. And he's reported to say at this meeting, and a throwaway line, nobody in the know liked President Truman very much, and he could appreciate it. So Admiral Hillenkotter says, it's just like the Manhattan Project, Mr. President. It was war. We couldn't tell anyone. This is war. Same thing. Then they explain to him that after they convene the working group, they'll task out research of the tech while keeping it from the Soviet spy machine, which they're afraid is like operating within the government, because they're not very good at getting the Soviet spies out of their own government. And so Secretary Hillenkotter says, we hide it from the government itself, create a whole new level of security classification just for this, the Central Intelligence Director said. Any information we decide to release, even internally, we downgrade so the people getting the information never have the security clearance that allows them all the way to the top. The only way to hide it from the Russians is to hide it from ourselves.
Cool. Plausible. Makes a lot of sense. I like this a lot.
Yeah, very believable. And also I'm interested in this idea. I don't quite understand this sentence. He says, like, even internally, we downgrade this information. I've heard elsewhere the claim that sometimes to keep something extra super secret, you actually like unsecretify some level of it. Like you declassify some aspect of it and you hide it in plain sight so that spies won't know to try and hack it. So maybe you would like dumb down the information, like gloss out some of the details, and like make it not a classified program. I don't understand what he's saying. Like when he says any information we decide to release, even internally, we downgrade so the people getting the information never have the security clearance that allows them all the way to the top. I don't understand that sentence
I don't
exactly.
either.
What about the information are you downgrading? Are you downgrading the classification level, or are
Yeah.
you downgrading the information?
Yeah.
So I guess it's probably that second one. Any
Yeah.
information we decide to release, even internally, we downgrade so the people getting the information never have the security clearance that now allows them all the way to the top. So they're like, I don't sharing only like subtle versions, only like fudgy versions of what they're doing when they do it via documents.
Hmm.
And that sounds believable also. And I buy this idea about the sheds, just like setting up new sheds when
Yeah.
old sheds get caught, and like moving to a new castle. And it does sound like that is probably still going on. He also had a take along these lines that like all these different agencies doing stuff like this believe that they're working for some like shadowy higher up group, but that's not necessarily always true. And sometimes there's just like nobody home and there's like no one in charge of
Hmm.
these various crash materials, for example. Like it's possible that he got a box of crash materials, but like also other people in the government got access to different parts of these, and like some tech that went into reverse engineering mode, Corso never saw. It's not like it all went through him. And he did say he never got to see the craft, for example. They never let him see the plane. He did describe, however, the glass that they found in what they said were portals from the inside, that when you looked through them, it looked like it was light out, even though it was nighttime. And his take was that material then became the upstream tech that led us to night vision goggles.
Wow.
It was a cool piece of maybe technology. He described that as something people noticed at the crash site. Like they got there and it was night, and they poked their heads in and like could see through these holes in the side that it looked like bright day outside. And they were like, "Oh, did the sun come up? No, what? Where's that light coming from?"
That's really cool. Um, okay, well, great job. This book sounds crazy. I want to read it.
Yeah, for
Is it?
sure. Oh, and a fun thing for everybody, the full text is available online. So
Oh,
you
that's
can
great.
put that in a link, and
Is it long?
somebody stole it. At like Rapido 3.5 speed, it's 3.5 hours.
Okay, so for a
Um,
normal human, yeah, it's kind of long, but
Probably like 12 hours, something like that, if you were listening. And then if you're going to look at this transcript, you can use some of the words that we used in this conversation to hop around and look for the specific segments, and we will put the link to the full text below.
outrageous. Okay, man. Thanks for your deep dive this week. That was very fun.
Thank you for listening. That was it was crazy. It's a whole lot of fun, this book, even if it is all made up. It's very poetic and it's interesting, and I think you still kind of like get a sense of the way the American military and intelligence communities have worked, and specifically the way they worked post World War II.
Yeah,
So
interesting.
the day after Roswell is what that's called. Thank you so much for spending the time. And
Cool.
if you're out there listening and you thought this was fun, just like comment at us so we hear something other than the dark winds of the never void, and we will totally engage with you.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, bro.
See you soon.